The rain had begun its relentless descent just as Ilara's car crunched over the gravel drive, a soft, insistent whisper against the windscreen that promised a long, dark evening. Through the streaked glass, the silhouette of Blackwood Manor rose from the mist like a forgotten dream, ancient stone draped in ivy, its windows glowing with a warm, inviting amber against the encroaching twilight. It was precisely as Julian had described it, imposing, elegant, and utterly steeped in history. She cut the engine, plunging the interior of her vintage roadster into a sudden, deep silence, broken only by the drumming of the rain and the distant rustle of unseen leaves. A shiver, not entirely from the chill, traced its way down her spine. This was more than just another consultation. She felt it in the charged air, in the way her heart had begun to beat a little faster the moment the gates had swung open for her. Gathering her portfolio and a small overnight bag, Ilara stepped out into the deluge, pulling her cashmere coat tighter around her. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth, pine and something else, a faint, sophisticated aroma that hinted at wood smoke and expensive leather, carried on the damp breeze. She hurried under the shelter of the portico, a grand archway supported by Doric columns, and reached for the heavy brass knocker. It was shaped like a lion's head, worn smooth in places by centuries of hands. The sound resonated deeply within the house, a resonant thud that seemed to swallow the rain's noise for a fleeting moment. She waited, listening. The silence that followed was profound, almost meditative. Just as she was about to knock again, the massive oak door swung inward with a slow, deliberate creak, revealing a man standing in the warm glow of the hall. He was exactly as she remembered him from their brief, formal meeting weeks ago in the city, and yet, not entirely. Here, in his own domain, Julian Thorne possessed an even more potent aura. He was tall, lean, with a kind of effortless elegance that suggested generations of refined taste. His dark hair, slightly damp at the temples, was brushed back from a high, intelligent forehead, and his eyes, the color of aged whiskey, held an unsettling intensity. He wore a charcoal cashmere sweater that molded to his broad shoulders and dark trousers, an outfit that managed to be both casual and impeccably tailored. "Ilara," he said, his voice a low, resonant rumble that seemed to vibrate through the very floorboards. It was a voice that invited confidences, a voice that could make a whisper sound like a promise. "You made it through the storm." "Julian," she replied, her own voice a little breathy, a consequence of the unexpected depth of his gaze. "It seems the storm made it to me." She offered a small, polite smile, conscious of the droplets clinging to her hair and the dampness of her coat. He stepped back, gesturing her in with a graceful sweep of his hand. "Come in. You must be freezing." The hall was a symphony of rich textures and hushed light. A grand staircase swept upwards, its banister intricately carved, disappearing into the shadows of the second floor. Walls were paneled in dark, polished wood, adorned with oil paintings in heavy gilded frames. A vast Persian rug, its colors muted by age, softened the stone floor. But it was the scent that truly enveloped her now. A complex blend of old books, beeswax, and a distinct musky spice that she vaguely recognized as his cologne. Julian closed the door with a soft click, sealing them inside. "Let me take your coat, and your bag." As he reached for her coat, his fingers brushed lightly against her arm, sending a jolt through her. It was a fleeting, accidental touch, yet it felt charged, as if an invisible current had passed between them. Her skin tingled where he'd touched her. He seemed oblivious, his movements smooth and unhurried, as he hung her coat on a stand and placed her bag discreetly by the stairs. "I've prepared the North Suite for you," he said, turning back to her. "Though I doubt you'll need it until much later. We have a great deal to discuss." "Of course," Ilara managed, trying to compose herself. She felt a warmth rising in her cheeks, a blush she attributed to the sudden shift in temperature from the cold outside to the welcoming warmth of the hall. He led her deeper into the house, his footsteps silent on the thick rugs. They passed through a series of rooms, each more captivating than the last. A vast library, its shelves overflowing with leather-bound volumes, exuded the comforting scent of aged paper and wisdom. A formal dining room, set for a single solitary dinner, hinted at a quiet, solitary existence. Everywhere, there was a sense of curated beauty, of objects chosen not just for their value, but for their story, their tactile appeal. And everywhere, there was velvet. Deep sapphire curtains pooling on the floor, emerald cushions nestled on antique settees, a rich crimson velvet runner gracing a hallway table. It seemed to be Julian's preferred texture, the unifying thread running through the tapestry of his home. It was sensuous, luxurious, absorbing light and sound, lending an almost dreamlike quality to the air. Finally, he led her into a room that was clearly his sanctum. "The study," he announced, a hint of something akin to pride in his voice. It was a large rectangular room, dominated by a magnificent fireplace where a log fire crackled and hissed, casting dancing shadows on the walls. The air here was even warmer, infused with the scent of burning wood and a faint, sweet aroma of pipe tobacco, though no pipe was in sight. Rich, dark wood paneling covered the walls from floor to ceiling, broken only by tall arched windows, now veiled by heavy floor-length curtains of a deep, midnight blue velvet. 2 large armchairs, upholstered in a coordinating velvet, flanked the fireplace, their inviting depths promising comfort. A large antique desk, strewn with papers and books, occupied a corner, but it was the small circular table by the fire, set with 2 crystal tumblers and a decanter of amber liquid, that drew her eye. "Please," Julian gestured to one of the armchairs. "Make yourself comfortable. I imagine you could use something to warm you." Ilara sank into the armchair, the velvet cool and smooth against her skin, then instantly warming to her touch. It felt like being embraced, swallowed by luxury. She watched as Julian poured 2 generous measures of what looked like single malt scotch. The clinking of ice, the amber liquid splashing into the glass. Each sound was amplified in the quiet intimacy of the room. He handed her a glass, his fingers brushing hers again. This time, the contact lingered for a fraction of a second longer, and she felt a distinct warmth spread through her palm, up her arm. His eyes, fixed on hers, held a flicker of something she couldn't quite decipher. Curiosity? Recognition? Desire? "Thank you," she murmured, taking a tentative sip. The whiskey was smooth, fiery, warming her from the inside out. It tasted of peat and oak, and a quiet strength. He settled into the opposite armchair, turning slightly to face her. The firelight played across the planes of his face, highlighting his sharp cheekbones and the curve of his lips. He took a sip of his own drink, his gaze never leaving hers. "So," he began, his voice softer now, more intimate. "The Thorn Textile Collection. You've reviewed the preliminary catalogue I sent?" Ilar nodded, placing her glass on a small inlaid side table. "Extensively. It's quite remarkable, Julian. The breadth, the historical significance. I'm particularly intrigued by the Byzantine silks and the Ottoman embroideries, and the Italian velvets, of course." She smiled, a genuine smile this time, feeling more at ease as they shifted to their professional purpose. This was her element. "Ah, the velvets," he said, a slow smile spreading across his face, a movement that transformed his features, softening the intensity. "My great-grandfather had a particular affinity for them. He believed velvet was the truest expression of luxury, both visually and tactilely. He often said it was a fabric that understood desire." Ilara felt a blush creep up her neck. His words, delivered with such quiet conviction, held a double meaning that resonated deeply. "I can see why," she said, looking down at the rich blue velvet of her armchair, running her fingers over its pile. "It's a fabric of unparalleled depth and richness. It invites touch." "Indeed it does," he agreed, his gaze following her hand, then returning to her eyes. There was an unspoken challenge in his look, a question that hung in the air between them. She cleared her throat, pulling her thoughts back to the collection. "My initial assessment is that the collection is largely intact and in excellent condition, considering its age. However, some pieces, especially the older ones, will require careful handling and potentially conservation work before exhibition. That's precisely why I called you, Ilara. Your reputation precedes you. the most discerning eye, the most delicate touch. I understand you have a unique approach to textile conservation, one that respects the integrity of the fabric while bringing its full beauty to light. His praise, delivered with such sincerity, pleased her. I try to, she said, meeting his gaze directly. Each piece tells a story. My job is to ensure that story can continue to be told without imposing my own narrative on it. A beautiful philosophy, he murmured, taking another slow sip of his whiskey. I believe that applies to more than just textiles. The conversation drifted, weaving between the specifics of the collection and more abstract discussions about art, beauty, and history. Ilara found herself completely absorbed, drawn in by Julian's intellect and his profound appreciation for the very things that fueled her own passion. He was articulate, insightful, and possessed a quiet wit that made her laugh more than once. The hours seemed to melt away, punctuated only by the crackle of the fire and the persistent patter of the rain outside. The whiskey, warm and potent, had begun to loosen her inhibitions. She found herself speaking more freely, sharing her theories and insights with an openness she rarely displayed in professional settings. And Julian listened, truly listened, his intense gaze unwavering, making her feel as though she were the only person in the world who mattered. At one point, he rose to replenish their glasses. As he leaned over the table, the scent of him, that intoxicating blend of spice, wood smoke, and something uniquely Julian, enveloped her. She caught a glimpse of the strong line of his jaw, the subtle stubble, the way his dark hair fell just so. Her breath hitched, a small, involuntary gasp. He straightened, handing her the fresh glass. Their fingers brushed again, this time for a beat longer. Her skin felt electrified. His eyes, normally so controlled, held a spark, a subtle heat that mirrored the sudden warmth blooming in her own chest. You're very passionate about your work, Ilara, he observed, his voice a low caress. It's more than work, she confessed, her voice a little husky. It's a calling, a connection to the past, to the hands that wove these threads, to the lives they touched. And what about the present? He asked, his gaze still holding hers, deepening. Do you find the same connection in the here and now? The question hung in the air, laden with unspoken meaning. The fire crackled, the rain whispered. Ilara felt a tremor pass through her. Her heart throbbed, a steady, insistent beat against her ribs. She felt utterly exposed, yet strangely exhilarated. Sometimes, she whispered, her voice barely audible. With certain people. A slow, knowing smile spread across Julian's lips, a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes, which remained fixed on hers with an unnerving intensity. I believe I understand. He leaned back in his chair, but the space between them felt charged, shrinking with every shared breath. The air crackled with a palpable tension, a silent language spoken between their gazes. The velvet seemed to absorb all other sound, amplifying the quiet thrum of their unspoken desires. Tell me, he said, his voice dropping to an even lower register. What is it about velvet that you find so captivating? Ilara took a moment, gathering her thoughts, her fingers tracing the rim of her glass. It's its duality, I think. It's incredibly strong, yet so soft. It absorbs light, creates these deep, shifting shadows that play with perception. It's luxurious, yet often understated. And there's the pile, the way it invites touch, the way it changes color when you stroke it one way, then the other. She looked up, her eyes wide, earnest. It's sensual, it's secretive, it holds warmth. Julian's eyes had darkened, his gaze never leaving her lips as she spoke. Sensual, secretive, holds warmth, he repeated, almost to himself. A perfect description, not just of the fabric perhaps. The implication hung between them, a silken thread of suggestion. Ilara felt a flush rise to her cheeks, the heat spreading down her neck. She could feel the pulse beating at the base of her throat. The whiskey had undoubtedly played a part in her candor, but it was Julian's presence, his unwavering attention that truly disarmed her. He reached out, slowly, deliberately, and picked up a small velvet cushion from the arm of his chair. It was a deep, rich burgundy. He ran his thumb over the fabric, his gaze still locked with hers. "When you touch velvet, what do you feel?" he asked, his voice barely a murmur. Ilara's breath caught. She watched his thumb move, feeling as if it were her own skin he was caressing. A yielding, she breathed. A softness that gives way, then resists. A warmth. He continued to stroke the cushion, his movements hypnotic. "And when you press into it?" She swallowed hard, her mouth suddenly dry despite the whiskey. "It leaves an impression," she whispered. "A memory of the touch." His gaze intensified, a raw elemental hunger in their depths. "Indeed?" he said, his voice a low, guttural sound. He put the cushion down, slowly, deliberately, then leaned forward, resting his forearms on his knees, his hands clasped loosely. The proximity was startling, exhilarating. Some impressions, Ilara, are impossible to erase. The silence that followed was thick, heavy with unspoken desire. The air in the room seemed to vibrate. Ilara felt a delicious tremor run through her, a mix of fear and exhilarating anticipation. She could feel the warmth radiating from him, smell the subtle, intoxicating scent of his skin. Her gaze drifted from his intense eyes to his mouth, the curve of his lips, the hint of a shadow in the corner. She wondered, with a sudden aching intensity, what it would feel like to press her own lips against his. The rain outside had lessened to a soft drizzle, a gentle counterpoint to the thunderous beating of her heart. The fire had settled into a steady glow, casting longer, softer shadows. The world outside the velvet-draped windows seemed to have receded, leaving them in this bubble of opulent intimacy. Julian shifted, unclenching his hands, and slowly reached out. Her breath hitched. His fingers, long and elegant, paused just inches from her own, which were resting on the velvet arm of her chair. The air between them crackled. She could feel the heat emanating from his skin, a silent invitation. "It's late," he said, his voice a little rougher now, as if he too was struggling for control. "You've had a long journey, and we haven't even begun to look at the collection itself." Ilara nodded, though the words felt distant, irrelevant. All she could focus on was the proximity of his hand, the promise held within its stillness. "I had a light supper prepared," he continued, his gaze still fixed on her. "Nothing formal, just something to sustain us. Unless you'd prefer to retire?" The thought of retiring to a solitary room, no matter how luxurious, felt like a betrayal of this moment, this charged atmosphere. "No," she said, her voice a little stronger than she expected. "Supper would be lovely, Julian." A slow, satisfied smile touched his lips, a genuine warmth finally reaching his eyes. He withdrew his hand, the sudden absence of its heat, a strange, aching void. "Excellent." He rose with an easy grace, extending a hand to her. "Come. The dining room awaits." Ilara placed her hand in his. His grip was firm, warm, and utterly captivating. As he pulled her gently to her feet, she swayed for a moment, her body feeling light and responsive. She met his gaze, and for a fleeting instant, she felt a profound sense of inevitability, as if every step of her life had led her to this very room, to this very touch, to this very man. The night, she knew, was only just beginning to unfold its velveteen secrets. The night, she knew, was only just beginning to unfold its velveteen secrets. Julian's thumb, she noticed, was gently stroking the back of her hand as they walked. It was a subtle, almost unconscious gesture, yet it sent a shiver of awareness tracing a path up her arm and settling deep within her core. The manor seemed to hum around them, a symphony of hushed opulence. Persian rugs muffled their footsteps, and the air, perfumed with the faint scent of old leather and something indefinably masculine and clean, Julian's own scent, perhaps, caressed her skin. They passed through a grand archway, its dark wood intricately carved with swirling motifs that seemed to dance in the soft, ambient light. The dining room, when they entered, was a breathtaking tableau. A massive mahogany table, polished to a mirror sheen, dominated the center, set for two with an exquisite array of crystal, silver, and delicate porcelain. A candelabra with 5 flickering flames cast a golden glow, illuminating a magnificent floral centerpiece of deep red roses and white lilies, their petals unfurling in silent beauty. Beyond the table, tall windows offered a glimpse of the moon-drenched gardens, the silver light painting the ancient trees in ethereal hues. Julian released her hand just as they reached the table, pulling out a chair for her with a smooth, practiced motion. "Please," he murmured, his voice a low invitation. As she settled into the plush velvet seat, the fabric yielding softly beneath her, she felt a quiet flutter in her chest. He then moved to his own chair, directly opposite her, and the gentle scraping sound of wood on wood seemed to punctuate the sudden silence that fell between them. The only sounds now were the soft crackle of the candles, and the distant rhythmic ticking of a grandfather clock from another room, a steady heartbeat measuring the passage of this extraordinary evening. "It's magnificent, Julian," Ilara breathed, her gaze sweeping across the room once more, taking in every detail. It was elegant, yes, but not ostentatious. It possessed a refined warmth, a sense of history, and quiet comfort that spoke volumes of its owner. He merely smiled, a slow, knowing curve of his lips that sent a fresh wave of warmth through her. "I'm glad you approve." His eyes in the candlelight held a depth that seemed to draw her in, reflecting the dancing flames with an intriguing glint. Almost as if on cue, a discreet tap sounded at the door, and a server, a quiet woman in a crisp uniform, entered with a silver cloche. She moved with quiet efficiency, placing a steaming bowl before each of them before retreating just as silently. "Tonight, we begin with a truffle consommé," Julian announced, his voice a silken murmur, followed by seared scallops with saffron risotto, and for a lighter finish, a lavender panna cotta. He watched her reaction, a playful anticipation in his eyes. Ilara's mouth watered. "It sounds divine. You've thought of everything?" "Only for you, Ilara," he replied, his gaze unwavering, making the simple statement feel like a profound declaration. He picked up his spoon, a graceful gesture, and she followed suit. The consommé was a revelation, rich, earthy, and perfectly balanced, a delicate warmth spreading through her with each spoonful. They ate in comfortable silence for a few moments, the intimacy of the shared meal deepening the connection between them. "Tell me, Ilara," Julian began, his voice cutting through the quiet, "what truly captivates you? Beyond the canvas, beyond the physical beauty of the world, what stirs your soul?" It was a question that went beyond polite dinner conversation, a dive into the deeper currents of her being. Ilara paused, considering. "Authenticity, I think," she confessed, meeting his gaze. "Raw emotion, unfiltered truth, whether it's in art or music or in people. There's a profound beauty in seeing someone truly themselves, stripped of pretense." She felt a vulnerability in her confession, yet with Julian, it felt safe. He nodded slowly, his eyes never leaving hers. "I understand that. It's a rare commodity in this world, isn't it? So many masks we wear." He leaned forward slightly, his elbows resting on the table, his posture attentive, engaged. "And what about you, Julian?" she dared to ask, emboldened by his openness. "What moves the man who lives in such a beautiful, solitary world?" A faint, almost imperceptible shift in his expression, a flicker in his eyes that suggested a hidden depth. "Order, perhaps," he mused, his voice dropping to a lower register. "The intricate patterns of the universe, the way disparate elements can coalesce into something harmonious and powerful, and paradoxically, the wild, untamed beauty that defies all order. The storm and the calm, the shadow and the light." His gaze intensified, locking with hers. "And lately," he added, his voice a whisper that seemed to ripple across the candlelit space, the spark of inspiration in another's eyes. Ilara felt a blush creep up her neck, a delicious warmth. His words were a caress, hinting at a connection that went beyond mere admiration. The server returned then, clearing away the consommé bowls and replacing them with the scallops and risotto. The aroma of saffron and the sea filled the air, a tantalizing promise. As they ate the second course, the conversation flowed more easily, a dance between revelation and gentle inquiry. They spoke of travel, of books, of the subtle nuances of human nature. Julian revealed a surprising passion for classical music, describing complex symphonies with a painter's vividness. Ilara, in turn, shared stories of her childhood, of the quiet moments of wonder she found in nature, of the way colors spoke to her. Each shared detail was like a brushstroke, adding depth and dimension to the portrait they were painting of each other. He watched her as she spoke, his gaze lingering on her lips, on the rise and fall of her chest beneath the silk of her dress. There was a possessive quality to his attention, not aggressive, but deeply appreciative, as if he were savoring every nuance of her being. She found herself responding in kind, her eyes tracing the strong line of his jaw, the curve of his mouth, the way his dark hair fell across his forehead. When the panna cotta arrived, its delicate purple hue and subtle floral scent were a perfect end to the meal. Julian took a spoonful, his eyes still on hers. "This, I think, is a taste of pure serenity," he commented, a soft smile playing on his lips. "It is," Ilara agreed, tasting the creamy, sweet lavender on her tongue. It was light, ethereal, leaving a lingering sweetness that mirrored the feeling blossoming within her. As the server cleared the table for the final time and discreetly withdrew, a comfortable silence descended, rich with unspoken desires. Julian reached across the table, his hand covering hers where it rested beside her plate. His touch was electric, a jolt of pure sensation that shot through her veins. His thumb began to trace lazy circles on the back of her hand, a mesmerizing rhythm that pulled her deeper into the present moment, into a hum-ha. "Ilara," he murmured, his voice a low thrum that resonated within her. "The night is still young. Would you care to join me in the drawing room? There's a vintage port I believe you might appreciate, and perhaps a more intimate space for conversation." Her heart gave a little leap. "I would like that very much, Julian," she whispered, her voice a little breathy. He rose first, then gently tugged her hand, helping her to her feet. This time he didn't release her. Their fingers remained intertwined as they walked from the dining room, the soft glow of the candles receding behind them. The drawing room was even more inviting than the dining room. It was a symphony of deep jewel tones, emerald velvets, sapphire silks, and rich mahogany. A grand fireplace, its mantel adorned with intricate carvings, held a low burning fire, casting a warm, flickering light that danced on the walls. Two large, deep armchairs, upholstered in forest green velvet, faced each other before the hearth, separated by a low, antique table laden with books and a decanter filled with amber liquid. Julian led her to one of the armchairs, releasing her hand only to place a gentle guiding touch on the small of her back as she settled into its luxurious depths. The velvet enveloped her, soft and yielding, and the warmth of the fire kissed her skin. He then moved to the low table, pouring 2 generous measures of port into delicate crystal glasses. The rich, sweet scent of the fortified wine filled the air as he brought one to her, his fingers brushing hers as she took it. "This is a 1970 Grahams," he explained, settling into the armchair opposite her, the firelight highlighting the strong angles of his face. "Ah, particularly good year. Complex with notes of dried fruit and spice." Ilara took a sip. The port was smooth, velvety, warming her from the inside out. "It's exquisite," she said, her eyes meeting his over the rim of the glass. The fire cast long, shifting shadows, making the room feel like a secret, private world. "You have a discerning palate, Ilara," he observed, his gaze lingering on her mouth. "In all things, I suspect." She felt a frisson of anticipation, a delicious tension coiling in her stomach. "Perhaps," she murmured, a playful challenge in her voice. "But some tastes are still new to me." His lips curved into a slow, sensual smile. "Then it would be my pleasure to introduce you to them." The implication hung in the air, thick and potent, making her breath catch. They fell into a comfortable silence, punctuated only by the crackle of the fire and the occasional clink of their glasses. Ilara found herself simply watching him, mesmerized by the way the firelight played on his features, by the quiet strength in his posture. He was a man of contrasts, Formidable yet gentle, reserved yet intensely passionate. I find myself wondering, Julian began, his voice soft, almost a whisper, what dreams you weave when the world goes dark, what colors paint the landscapes of your slumber. It was another deeply personal question, inviting her into a realm of intimacy she rarely shared. Sometimes, she confessed, her voice equally soft, they're vivid, riotous explosions of color, almost too much to contain. Other times, they're quiet whispers of forgotten memories, fragments of light and shadow, like charcoal sketches. She paused, looking into his eyes. And sometimes, Julian, they're about yearning. About a feeling of incompleteness that searches for something or someone to make it whole. He held her gaze, a profound understanding passing between them. I know that yearning, he admitted, his voice a low rumble. That sense of a missing piece. For a long time I thought I had grown accustomed to it, learned to live with the echoes in the empty spaces. He leaned forward slightly, his eyes holding hers with an unwavering intensity. But tonight, Elara, he continued, his voice dropping to a near whisper, those echoes are beginning to fade, replaced by a new song. Her heart pounded a slow, heavy rhythm against her ribs. The air between them thickened, charged with an undeniable current. She felt a magnetic pull, an irresistible urge to bridge the small distance that separated them. He reached out then, his hand slowly extending across the space between their chairs. His fingers, long and elegant, brushed against her cheek, a feather-light touch that sent shivers down her spine. Her skin tingled where he touched her, awakening a hunger she hadn't realized was dormant. You are even more beautiful in the firelight, Elara, he said, his thumb gently stroking the delicate curve of her cheekbone. His voice was husky now, imbued with a deep, raw emotion. Every curve, every shadow, every flicker of emotion in your eyes. She leaned into his touch, her eyes fluttering closed for a moment, savoring the exquisite sensation. When she opened them, his face was closer, his gaze burning into hers. The air crackled with unspoken desires, with a tension that was almost unbearable, yet utterly thrilling. Julian, she breathed, his name a soft plea on her lips. He moved then, slowly, deliberately, rising from his chair and kneeling before hers. His eyes never left hers, a silent question, a powerful invitation. He took her hand, the one not holding the port glass, and brought it to his lips, pressing a soft, lingering kiss to her knuckles. The warmth of his mouth, the soft rasp of his lips, sent a wave of heat through her entire being. I have waited for you, Elara, he confessed, his voice a low, resonant murmur that seemed to vibrate through her very bones. Though I didn't know your name or your face, I felt your absence. His words were a revelation, a confirmation of the profound connection she had felt from the moment she saw him. Tears pricked at the corners of her eyes, not of sadness, but of a sudden, overwhelming joy, a sense of belonging she had never truly experienced. He released her hand, but only to cup her face gently with both of his. His thumbs stroked her jawline, his gaze searching hers, asking for permission, for surrender. Her heart hammered, a frantic drumbeat against her ribs. She wanted this. Wanted him, with an intensity that surprised and exhilarated her. Elara, he whispered again, his voice thick with emotion, his eyes dropping to her lips. She didn't need words. Her gaze, her slight tilt of the head, her parted lips, spoke volumes. Slowly, agonizingly slowly, he leaned in. Her breath hitched in her throat, her senses heightened to an unbearable degree. She could feel the warmth radiating from his body, smell the intoxicating scent of his skin, the subtle aroma of the port on his breath. Her eyes closed just as his lips, soft and tentative at first, brushed against hers. It was a tentative exploration, a feather-light touch that promised so much more. Then, with a soft sigh that seemed to escape both of them, his lips deepened the kiss, pressing more firmly, more demandingly. It was a kiss of exquisite tenderness, of burgeoning passion, a silent dialogue that spoke of longing and discovery. Her fingers, almost unconsciously, rose to tangle in his dark hair, pulling him closer, deepening the connection. His mouth moved on hers, a gentle persuasion, a loving insistence. She responded instinctively, her lips parting slightly, inviting him in. He accepted the invitation, his tongue tracing the soft seam of her lips before gently, tantalizingly, meeting hers. A spark ignited, then burst into a raging fire consuming her. The world outside the drawing room ceased to exist. There was only Julian, his taste, his scent, the intoxicating feel of his lips on hers. His hand, still cupping her face, tilted her head to a more yielding angle, allowing for a deeper, more passionate exploration. She felt herself melting into him, into the kiss. A delicious surrender to the overwhelming sensations. He broke the kiss slowly, reluctantly, pulling back just enough for their foreheads to touch, their breaths mingling in the firelit air. Her eyes fluttered open, meeting his, which would dart with desire, yet filled with a profound tenderness. "Elara," he breathed, his voice raw, "you are everything I never knew I was searching for." She could only gaze at him, her heart overflowing, her body humming with a delicious ache. She felt utterly seen, utterly desired, utterly cherished. This was not merely physical attraction, it was something far deeper, a recognition of souls. He straightened then, but did not move away. Instead, he reached for her hand once more, his fingers intertwining with hers, his thumb stroking the soft skin of her palm. "Come," he said, his voice a gentle command, a promise. "Let me show you the stars." He led her from the drawing room, their hands still clasped, into a dimly lit corridor, and then through a pair of tall arched doors that opened onto a vast stone terrace. The night air, cool and fresh, was a welcome contrast to the warmth of the fire, yet the heat Julian ignited within her remained. Above them, the sky was a breathtaking tapestry of velvet black, strewn with countless glittering stars, a celestial river of light stretching into infinity. The moon, a luminous silver disk, cast a gentle glow over the manicured gardens, transforming them into a landscape of dreams. Julian guided her to a stone balustrade, its surface cool beneath her fingertips. He stood behind her, his body a warm, solid presence against her back. His arms came around her, not in a possessive grip, but in a tender embrace, his hands resting lightly on her waist. He leaned his chin on her shoulder, his breath warm against her ear. "Do you see it?" he murmured, his voice a low rumble. "The infinite possibilities, the boundless beauty?" Elara looked up at the vast expanse, her heart swelling with emotion. With Julian's arms around her, the universe felt less daunting, more welcoming. She felt a deep sense of peace, a profound connection not only to him, but to the world itself. "I do," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "It's overwhelming." "It is," he agreed, his voice a soft caress. "And yet, within that vastness, we find our own small precious space, our own universe of two." His grip on her waist tightened almost imperceptibly, drawing her closer until she could feel the subtle contours of his body against hers. His lips brushed against her temple, then moved slowly, tenderly along her jawline, sending shivers cascading down her neck. Her head tilted back slightly, granting him access, her eyes closing as she surrendered to the exquisite sensations. His breath mingled with her hair, his scent enveloping her, intoxicating her. "Elara," he whispered, his voice a soft plea, his lips now hovering just above hers. "The night is still unfolding, and I find myself wanting to explore every single one of its secrets with you." Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic, joyous rhythm. She knew, with an absolute certainty, that she wanted to explore them too. All of them. With him. The stars above seemed to wink in agreement, their silent promise echoing the unspoken desires that now pulsed between them, vibrant and undeniable. The night was indeed just beginning, and its velveteen secrets beckoned, promising a journey into depths she had only ever dreamed of. He lifted his head just enough for their eyes to meet, his gaze a deep, swirling current that promised to pull her under, willingly. A slow, knowing smile curved his lips, a silent invitation that mirrored the one thrumming in her own veins. He didn't speak, not immediately, but the pressure of his hand against her lower back intensified, a gentle, guiding force. Her fingers, still tangled in the silky strands at his nape, tightened almost imperceptibly, a silent plea for him to never let go. The air around them, once cool with the night breeze, now felt charged, thick with unspoken desires, and the scent of salt, and his subtle, intoxicating cologne. He shifted, rising slowly, pulling her with him until they stood chest to chest, the soft sand yielding beneath their bare feet. He reached up, his thumb tracing the line on her jaw, a feather-light touch that sent shivers dancing down her spine. "Come," he murmured, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through her. "Let's find those secrets." He took her hand, his fingers lacing with hers, a firm, possessive grip that felt both comforting and thrilling. The warmth of his skin against hers was an anchor in the swirling tempest of her emotions. He led her away from the moon-drenched expanse of the beach, not back towards the path they'd arrived on, but along a less trodden route, a winding, narrow trail that hugged the coastline. The sand here was softer, undisturbed, whispering under their feet. The palm fronds overhead create dappled shadows, enhancing the sense of a clandestine journey. The rhythmic crash of the waves became a distant serenade as they moved further inland, the air growing warmer, heavier with the scent of night-blooming jasmine and some unknown sweet tropical flower. She trusted him implicitly, letting him guide her through the darkness, her hand in his, her heart soaring. Each step felt like a step deeper into a dream, a delicious surrender to the unknown. After a few minutes of walking, the path opened onto a small, secluded cove. Nestled against the cliff face, almost invisible until they were upon it, was a small, elegant wooden boat, its polished hull gleaming faintly in the moonlight. It was a classic design, sleek and inviting, with a small cabin and an open deck. A soft, amber light glowed from within the cabin, casting a warm, welcoming hue onto the water. "Our chariot," he said, his voice closer now as he turned to face her, his eyes still holding hers. He gestured towards the boat with a sweeping hand. "For the next leg of our adventure." A gasp escaped her lips, a soft sound of wonder. This was more than she could have ever imagined. He helped her onto the small jetty, his hand steadying her at her waist, a touch that lingered for a moment longer than necessary, sending a fresh wave of heat through her. He then stepped aboard himself, moving with a practiced ease that bespoke familiarity with the vessel. "Welcome aboard," he said, extending a hand to her, pulling her gently onto the deck. The wood beneath her feet felt smooth and cool. The gentle rocking of the boat was a soothing rhythm against the backdrop of her racing pulse. He moved to the helm, and with a quiet hum, the engine sparked to life. The boat glided smoothly away from the shore, cutting a silent path through the moonlit waters. She stood beside him, the wind whipping gently through her hair, the spray of the ocean a cool kiss on her skin. The island receded into a shimmering silhouette, its lights twinkling like fallen stars. The vastness of the sea stretched out before them, an endless canvas of dark velvet and silver moonlight. This was freedom, exhilaration, and an intimacy born of shared adventure. He didn't speak much during the journey, but his presence beside her was a powerful, comforting force. His arm, strong and warm, rested casually against hers, a silent connection that transcended words. She occasionally caught him glancing at her, his eyes full of a tenderness that made her breath catch, a promise of everything yet to come. After what felt like an age, but was likely no more than 20 minutes, a new shape emerged from the darkness. It was a smaller, more secluded island, its edges softened by a dense canopy of trees. As they drew closer, she could discern the faint glow of lights nestled among the foliage, hinting at a hidden dwelling. He expertly maneuvered the boat into a small private cove where a discreet wooden dock extended into the water. The air here was even more fragrant, a heady mix of exotic blossoms and damp earth. He cut the engine, and the sudden silence was profound, broken only by the gentle lapping of waves against the hull. "We're here," he murmured, his voice rich with anticipation. He secured the boat with practiced movements, then turned to her, offering his hand. She took it, her fingers intertwining with his as he helped her onto the dock. A narrow, winding path, illuminated by soft, solar-powered lanterns tucked discreetly among the plants, led them away from the water. The path was bordered by lush, tropical vegetation, creating a sense of being completely enveloped by nature. The air was thick with the calls of unseen nocturnal creatures, a symphony of the wild that only added to the enchanting atmosphere. The path eventually opened onto a small clearing, where a breathtaking villa stood bathed in the soft glow of interior lights. It was a masterpiece of natural design, built with dark, rich woods and expansive glass panels that seemed to dissolve into the surrounding jungle. Verandas wrapped around every level, offering panoramic views of the ocean and the starry sky. "Welcome to my sanctuary," he said, his voice a low, intimate whisper, as he led her up a few broad steps to the main entrance. The door, a massive slab of carved wood, swung open silently as he pushed it inward. Stepping inside was like entering another world. The interior was a study in understated luxury, a seamless blend of natural elements and modern comforts. High ceilings, polished wooden floors, and an open-plan design created an airy, expansive feel. Soft, indirect lighting bathed the space in a warm, inviting glow. The air was cool, subtly scented with sandalwood, and something uniquely him. The living area was dominated by plush, oversized sofas draped with soft throws, and a grand fireplace that, even unlit, exuded a sense of cozy grandeur. Beyond the living space, through a wall of floor-to-ceiling glass, a private infinity pool shimmered under the moonlight, reflecting the stars above. "It's incredible," she breathed, her voice barely a whisper, turning slowly on the spot, taking it all in. Her heart felt as though it might burst with the sheer wonder of the moment. This place was a secret, a haven, and he had brought her here. He released her hand, but only to place both of his hands gently on her shoulders, turning her to face him. His eyes, in the soft light of the villa, held a depth she hadn't seen before, a profound tenderness mixed with an undeniable spark of desire. "I wanted to bring you somewhere truly special," he said, his thumbs stroking the delicate skin of her collarbone, "somewhere we could truly—" He led her further into the villa, past the living area, towards a spacious, open kitchen where a bottle of chilled champagne sat waiting in a silver bucket, alongside two delicate flutes. A celebratory toast, he offered, his eyes twinkling to new beginnings and to secrets yet to unfold. He popped the cork with a soft "whip-a," the sound echoing pleasantly in the quiet space. He poured the sparkling liquid, handing her a flute. Their fingers brushed as she took it, sending a jolt of electricity through her. "To us," she said, her voice a little breathless, raising her glass. "To us," he echoed, his gaze never leaving hers. Their glasses chimed softly, a delicate sound that sealed the unspoken promise. He took a sip, then set his glass down, reaching for hers and gently taking it from her hand, placing it next to his. Then he reached out, cupping her face in his hands, his thumbs tracing the curve of her cheekbones. His touch was both tender and firm, a silent declaration. Her eyes fluttered closed for a moment, savoring the feeling, the anticipation. When she opened them, his face was close, his eyes dark and hungry, yet infinitely gentle. "I've been wanting to do this properly," he whispered, his voice a low thrum against her lips, "from the moment I saw you." And then his mouth was on hers again, a deeper, more consuming kiss than before. It was a kiss that spoke of longing, of yearning, of all the moments they hadn't shared, and all the moments they would. His lips were soft yet firm, moving with a confident artistry that made her head spin. She responded instantly, eagerly, her hands finding their way to his chest, then sliding upwards to tangle in his hair once more. The kiss deepened, becoming a slow, sensual dance of discovery. His tongue gently traced the seam of her lips, a silent request that she readily granted. Her mouth parted, inviting him in, and he entered, slowly, exquisitely, exploring the soft, warm cavern with a delicious thoroughness that left her breathless. A soft moan escaped her throat, a sound she barely recognized as her own. He pulled her closer, his arms wrapping around her waist, lifting her slightly, pressing her body flush against his. She could feel the hard planes of his chest, the defined muscles of his thighs, the undeniable heat radiating from him. Her body hummed in response, a fierce primal awakening. Every nerve ending seemed alight, every sensation amplified. When he finally broke the kiss, it was with a soft sigh, his forehead resting against hers, their breaths mingling. "You have no idea," he murmured, his voice hoarse with emotion, "how long I've waited for you." Her heart ached with a sweet, profound tenderness. She understood. She felt it too. This sense of having found something. Someone she hadn't even known she was searching for. She leaned into his touch, her hands still cradling his head, her fingers gently stroking his hair. He moved, guiding her away from the kitchen, towards another part of the villa. The path led to a spacious bedroom, a haven of peace and sensuality. The massive bed, draped in crisp white linens, dominated the room, framed by a dark wooden headboard. A subtle, warm glow emanated from bedside lamps, casting soft shadows. A large open-air balcony beckoned from beyond another wall of glass, promising a view of the moonlit ocean. He stopped in the center of the room, turning her to face him fully. His gaze swept over her, a slow, appreciative journey that made her skin tingle. His hands, which had been resting on her waist, now drifted lower, tracing the curve of her hips, then rising to rest on her ribs. "You are exquisite," he whispered, his voice thick with admiration. His thumbs brushed against the delicate fabric of her dress, just beneath her breasts. The simple friction was enough to send a fresh wave of desire through her. He reached for the delicate strap of her dress, his fingers brushing against her bare shoulder as he eased it down. The movement was slow, deliberate, each touch a promise. She stood still, her breath held captive in her chest, watching his face, mesmerized by the intensity in his eyes. One strap slid down, then the other, revealing the smooth expanse of her collarbone, the gentle curve of her shoulder. He paused, his gaze lingering on the newly exposed skin, then dipped his head, pressing a soft, lingering kiss to her shoulder, just where the strap had been. His lips were warm, his breath a soft caress against her skin. A shiver, delicious and undeniable, ran through her. He straightened, his eyes meeting hers, a question in their depths. She answered with a silent nod, her own desire mirroring his. He reached for the zipper at the back of her dress, his fingers brushing the sensitive skin of her spine as he slowly, tantalizingly, pulled it down. The fabric whispered as it loosened, easing away from her body. She felt the cool air against her skin as the dress began to fall. He helped her shrug it off, the soft material pooling at her feet like a discarded dream. She stood before him in her delicate lace lingerie, feeling both vulnerable and incredibly powerful under his admiring gaze. The lace, a whisper-thin creation, offered little concealment, yet somehow felt more alluring than full dress. His eyes devoured her, a slow, deliberate appreciation that made her cheeks flush with warmth. "Beautiful," he breathed, the single word a profound compliment. He reached out, his fingers tracing the delicate lace of her bra, following the curve of her breast. The touch was light, almost reverent, yet it ignited a burning heat deep within her. She reached for him then, her hands going to the buttons of his shirt. He stood patiently, letting her undress him, his eyes never leaving hers. Her fingers, a little shaky with anticipation, worked their way down the row of buttons. The fabric, soft and expensive, parted to reveal the taut expanse of his chest, dusted with dark, fine hair. She pushed the shirt off his shoulders, letting it fall to the floor beside her dress. His skin was warm and smooth beneath her fingertips, his muscles clearly defined. She rested her palms against his chest, feeling the strong, steady beat of his heart against her own. He reached for her, pulling her close again, skin against skin, the contact electric. Her breasts, barely contained by the lace, pressed against his warm chest, sending exquisite sensations through her. He groaned softly, a raw, guttural sound that thrilled her to her core. His hands slid down her back, tracing the delicate curve of her spine, then settled on her hips, pulling her even closer until their lower bodies met, a soft, undeniable press of desire against desire. The thin fabric of her panties was the only barrier between them, and it felt like an unbearable distance. He began to kiss her again, slowly at first, then with increasing passion, his lips demanding, his tongue exploring. She responded with equal fervor, her hands finding purchase in his hair, pulling him closer, deepening the kiss until the world dissolved into a haze of sensation and heat. He lifted her into his arms, a feat of strength that made her gasp softly. She wrapped her legs around his waist, her body fitting against his as if made for him. He carried her to the bed, laying her down gently on the cool, crisp sheets. The soft white fabric felt luxurious against her bare skin. He followed her down, his weight heavy and comforting as he stretched out beside her. He propped himself on one elbow, his gaze sweeping over her body, still adorned by the delicate lace. His fingers, warm and skilled, began to trace the edges of her lingerie, a slow, tantalizing exploration. "Every curve," he whispered, his voice husky, "every inch, I want to know them all." His fingers found the band of her panties, tracing the elastic, then slipping beneath the lace, caressing the sensitive skin of her hip. A gasp escaped her, her body arching involuntarily towards his touch. He smiled, a slow, wicked curve of his lips that promised delightful torment. He leaned down, his lips brushing against hers, a whisper-like touch that drove her wild. "Are you ready, my love?" he breathed, his eyes dark with desire, to truly explore these secrets. Her answer was a soft moan, a silent plea as she reached for him, her fingers tangling in his hair, pulling him down for another kiss, eager to shed the last vestiges of clothing, and truly begin their journey into the depths of their shared desire. The night was still young, and the secrets of the villa, and of their bodies, awaited. His lips claimed hers again, a deeper, more insistent kiss that spoke volumes of his pent-up longing. Her fingers tightened in his dark hair, pulling, urging as her body arched into his, a silent conversation of shared impatience. He responded with a low growl, a primal sound that vibrated through her, sending shivers of exquisite anticipation down her spine. With a graceful sweep, he untied the delicate silk ribbon that held her robe, the fabric sighing as it fell away, pooling around her feet like moonlight on marble. The cool night air, scented with jasmine from the garden, kissed her skin, a tantalizing prelude to his touch. His gaze devoured her, slow and reverent, from the curve of her collarbone to the swell of her hips. A small gasp escaped her as his eyes, dark as midnight pools, lingered on the peak of her breasts, already taut and aching for his attention. He reached out, not to touch but to hover, his palm a breath away from her skin, radiating warmth that made her tremble. "So beautiful," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion, "more beautiful than any secret hidden within these walls." Her own hands, emboldened, began their reciprocal exploration. With a delicate touch, she unfastened the buttons of his shirt, each one a tiny victory. The crisp linen gave way to reveal the sculpted planes of his chest, the taut lines of his shoulders, and the subtle ripple of muscle that promised strength and tenderness. She traced the path of dark hair that arrowed downwards, her fingers tingling with every contact. He shivered beneath her touch, a clear sign of his own barely contained desire. His shirt joined her robe on the floor, a discarded memory of the day, leaving him bare to the waist, a magnificent, living sculpture under the soft glow of the bedside lamp. He moved then, guiding her back onto the bed, the silk sheets cool and welcoming against her heated skin. He followed, leaning over her, supporting himself on his elbows, his gaze never leaving hers. The last barrier, her delicate lace chemise, seemed to melt under his intense stare. With a slow, deliberate motion, he reached for the slender straps, his fingertips brushing her skin as he slid them down her shoulders. The lace clung for a moment, then surrendered, revealing the full, luscious curve of her breasts. He inhaled sharply, his chest expanding, and then lowered his head, not to kiss her lips, but to taste the soft skin of her throat, trailing a path of fire downwards. Her hands found the waistband of his trousers, fumbling slightly in her eagerness. He chuckled softly, a low rumbling sound against her skin, and helped her, his fingers brushing hers as they worked in tandem. The fabric gave way, and soon he was as bare as she, a magnificent vision of masculine power and grace. The air between them crackled with unspoken promises, with years of shared glances, whispered words, and now, this glorious culmination. He moved closer still, his body settling against hers, skin to skin, a delicious friction that made her arch her back into him. The hard planes of his chest against her breasts, the tautness of his stomach against hers, the warm press of his thighs. It was an exquisite agony of contact. He kissed her again, deeply, thoroughly, his tongue delving, exploring, mirroring the unspoken desires that pulsed between them. Her hands roamed over his back, marveling at the strength, the smoothness, the way his muscles flexed under her touch. "My love," she whispered against his lips, her voice barely a breath. "I've waited for this." He pulled back just enough to look into her eyes, a tender smile playing on his lips. "And I, for you. Every moment, every day has led us here." His fingers began to trace languid patterns on her skin, from her hip bone upwards over her ribs to the underside of her breast. He cupped her, his thumb brushing over her hardened nipple, sending a jolt of pure pleasure through her core. A soft moan escaped her lips, and he took it with his own, deepening the kiss, his body pressing more intimately into hers. The bed seemed to cradle them, the silken sheets whispering secrets as they shifted, entwined. The moonlight, now streaming more boldly through the open balcony doors, painted silver streaks across their limbs, highlighting the exquisite beauty of their joined forms. There was no rush, no urgency beyond the insistent thrum of their hearts. Each touch was a revelation, each kiss a deeper dive into the exquisite tapestry of their shared desire. He explored the curve of her waist, the delicate indentation of her spine, the soft swell of her buttocks, his hands possessive yet infinitely gentle. She, in turn, reveled in the feel of his powerful shoulders, the tautness of his abdomen, the firm strength of his thighs. He moved lower, his lips trailing fire down her stomach, across her hip, his breath warm and intoxicating against her inner thigh. Her fingers threaded into his hair, holding him close as tremors began to ripple through her. His knowing touch, the delicate brush of his lips, the soft caress of his tongue, each sensation built upon the last, weaving a spell of pure, unadulterated pleasure. She gasped, her body arching off the bed as he found her most sensitive spot, a sweet, aching pressure that promised oblivion. Her hips began to move instinctively, seeking more, urging him on. He lifted his head, his eyes burning into hers, a silent question passing between them. Her answer was a desperate plea, a soft whimper that tore from her throat. He smiled, a slow, sensual curve of his lips, and then, with a deep breath, he moved over her, positioning himself, a silent, powerful presence. Her legs instinctively wrapped around his waist, drawing him in, making him hers. The first touch was a sigh, a soft intake of breath from them both. He entered her slowly, deliberately, a careful, tender invasion that filled her with a glorious, aching completeness. Her eyes fluttered shut, a tear of pure joy escaping the corner as she felt herself stretch and embrace him fully. He paused, allowing their bodies to adjust, to become one, the world outside fading into insignificance. "Are you with me, my love?" he whispered, his voice husky, his forehead resting against hers. "Always," she breathed back, her voice thick with emotion. He began to move then, a slow, rhythmic dance that started subtly, then gathered momentum. Each thrust was a deeper plunge into the heart of their intimacy, a powerful affirmation of their connection. She met him stroke for stroke, her body responding with an ancient wisdom, her hips rising to meet his descent. The rhythm intensified, building, a primal drumbeat echoing in the quiet of the night. Her breath came in ragged gasps, his in deep guttural moans. The sensations were overwhelming, a kaleidoscope of pleasure that spiraled higher and higher. The friction, the heat, the exquisite pressure, the feeling of being utterly consumed and utterly consuming. She could feel every inch of him, taste the salt on his skin, hear the frantic pounding of his heart against her ear. The world narrowed to the space between their bodies, a universe of sensation, a vortex of shared passion. Her body tightened around him, a sweet, insistent clenching that drove him to the brink. He groaned, his movements becoming more urgent, his face etched with pure, unbridled desire. She felt herself climbing, a beautiful, terrifying ascent towards the peak, her muscles trembling, her mind dissolving into pure feeling. He met her there, his powerful thrusts pushing her higher, until she shattered, 1,000 tiny stars exploding behind her eyelids. A cry tore from her throat, a joyous primal sound that mingled with his own guttural roar as he followed her over the edge, pouring himself into her, a final shuddering release. They collapsed together, breathless and spent, their bodies slick with sweat, their hearts pounding a wild, glorious rhythm against each other. For a long time they lay entwined, the silence of the room punctuated only by their ragged breathing. The moonlight still streamed in, now softer, gentler, as if sharing in their quiet contentment. He pressed a kiss to her temple, then to her lips, a tender, possessive gesture that spoke volumes. "My secret," he whispered, his voice still hoarse, "my most precious discovery." She chuckled softly, nestling closer into his embrace, feeling the slow, steady beat of his heart beneath her ear. "And you, mine, the greatest treasure this villa holds." He held her tighter, pulling the silken sheet up over their bodies, a protective cocoon against the cooling night air. The jasmine scent still wafted in, now mingled with the musky aroma of their lovemaking. There was a deep, abiding peace that settled over them, a profound sense of rightness. All the romantic tension that had simmered between them, all the unspoken desires, had found their glorious release, leaving behind a connection that felt deeper, more resilient than ever before. She traced the outline of his jaw with her finger, feeling the rough stubble against her skin. "I knew," she murmured, "from the moment I saw you across that fountain, that there was something extraordinary waiting for us here." He kissed the top of her head. "And I, the moment your eyes met mine. This villa, its secrets, they were merely the backdrop for our own unfolding story." The night was no longer young, but a new dawn was surely on the horizon, promising not an end, but a glorious beginning. They had explored the depths of their shared desire, not just physically, but emotionally, spiritually. The secrets of the villa had been unveiled, but the true revelation had been the boundless love that existed between them. As sleep began to gently claim her, she smiled, utterly content, utterly loved. She knew with a certainty that hummed in her very soul that this was just the first chapter of many magnificent nights, many more secrets to explore, and a lifetime of shared passion yet to come. The journey with him had truly just begun.